Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about Aladdin from 2019. I think the problem with all these Disney live action remakes is they don't really set out to make, let's say, a good movie. They set out to make a movie that is heavily, obviously, a remake of another movie that's both animated and usually better. And I think when we sit down for these films, we automatically know it's going to have certain beats and certain things within it, because how could it not? Because it's a Disney remake. Of course it's going to. But that makes it kind of really boring as an audience, because almost every time I'm watching it, and not, because I'm, comparing them unfairly. I mean, it is unfair because those are like good movies, but it's also unfair to anyone making the film, because it's almost within the kind of guise of these films. They have to be like these classic animated films, or usually classics as far as they've made them. I think Aladdin is maybe actually in some ways a little more promising than a lot of them. It's not good. And I think that's kind of the problem, is in its whole like DNA, I don't think it could have ever really been that good. It's almost like the studio demands it be a certain way. The way the studio or Disney demands it be sucks, basically. It's like calling to mind other things that are done by other people. It's like watching a cover band. There's reasons you want to see a cover band, because you didn't get to see that band live and you always wanted to, and you heard this cover band's good, and so you'll spend the money just to like sort of have a good night out. And I think these movies are sort of like that. You get to experience that sort of thing. You get to experience Aladdin with your kids. But I don't think these films ever answer the question, like, that's why you didn't re-release the original. Why call to mind the other films so much? And in Aladdin, there's often times where they mention things in the songs that aren't there on the screen. One in particular, in the opening song with Aladdin, where he's like, riff raff street rat, all that whole thing, and he's being chased by the guards. There's a part where the girl says, and I think he's rather tasty. And in the animated movie, there's a woman there who's obviously sexually attracted to Aladdin and wants to, do stuff with him and stuff, and he didn't want to, and it's like, haha, this lady's is not attracted, or it's whatever. But not that it's like my favorite moment, but I noticed when they do that in this, she still has the line, but just like doesn't work in the scene. It's more about like her fighting off guards, which was like weird. Like, why would you do that with that line? There were a couple of times I noticed during the songs they were just like, well, we have to say this line. We just never really came up with like a reason for it, or made it feel natural for these actors who are playing these roles to do it in this version of it. And like most of the time when you like adapt things, you like change them for the actors and the crew and stuff like that. And other than like slowing the tempo down to all of the songs, which is super weird, there's not really much of an adaptation to it. It's really just like do these beats and add a bunch of new crap that is like real bad. Like her song about freedom and stuff just feels real shoehorned in, like, hey, we were getting that Oscar nomination. All of the new songs they put in these Disney live action remakes are so horrendous. Like, I don't know why they even bother trying to do that. Like, is there like a cut song from the original one you could have put in here or something, but you put this crap. Now in this, she wants to be the Sultan, and they do get into more of those details in this film about how her marrying the guy was more about expanding the empire and stuff, which I did talk about in my review of the 92 film. And like that they made in the animated one, in the 92 one, made Jasmine it more of a feminist idea and erased the whole idea of that kingdoms would marry off their children for property and to expand the kingdom and so forth. And that's the other thing with these, is like they add details to things where they're like, well, what if Belle's mom died in the plague? Because like, of course, right? And you're like, I mean, sure, but I could also not have the answer to some of this crap. And I think in this movie, I was watching it thinking like what we're gaining from learning like there's another kingdom and they want to go to war with this kingdom who we never see. I was super worried Aladdin was going to die in like a big war battle scene they're going to have at the end, which would have been original and different, but still stupid. I think a lot of this, like, it just reminds you of other things and makes you want to watch that other one, because it's referencing it so much. Like, you can never forget about it as an audience, because the movie never lets you forget about it, because it wants to remind you of it, but then in fact it makes you just look at it as more of an afterthought. This is like the same as all of them. Like, it got boring because you're like, oh, okay, I know, this is how you do it, this is what these movies are, neat. But Aladdin, I like the actor who played Aladdin, Mina Musad. I thought he was actually very charismatic, and I was surprised how much I liked him. I didn't expect that. Same with the actress who played Jasmine, Naomi Scott, I thought did a great job as well. They had a lot of charisma. They had good charisma together. He felt like he maybe shouldn't have been leading a movie just yet. Maybe do some indies before doing a big movie like this. But he still, I enjoyed watching him, and I didn't expect that at all between the two of them. Will Smith, I think, came up with a good concept of how to play the genie, which I think helps, is that he's essentially playing Hitch. The Hitch genie, you know, that's basically what he's doing instead of doing Robin Williams' genie. But he doesn't really, like, he still has to do all those beats, like Never Had a Friend Like Me and stuff. And that, like, him having to be a Robin Williams type, not that he's doing Robin Williams, but trying to sort of recreate those lines and stuff, really doesn't work. And I like, that's the other problem with this. That was tailor-made for Robin Williams. This doesn't feel as tailor-made for Will Smith. I think that's like one of the bigger problems with it, is like it felt like the younger actors were better cast than the major movie star they spent millions and millions of dollars on. And then you have Guy Ritchie, who directed this film, who speeds up footage sometimes, but that's as weird in Guy Ritchie as he gets. You really, like, Guy Ritchie has basically like just become a studio director in this. Like, he's not doing anything interesting or fun or anything like that. He's just He is just doing what the studio wants him to do, and he speeds up the footage at certain points. I don't think he has a reason for it other than like, hey, we gotta like get this done, and I am still Guy Ritchie, remember that? And everyone's like, no, nobody cares. Like, you're not the lock stock guy anymore. You're making fucking Aladdin. I think one of the worst casts was the guy who played Jafar, Marwan Khanzari. He just didn't have the camp value, the fun. He wasn't an interesting villain. He was kind of just like a villain who, he's just evil, but he wasn't a fun villain to watch. I liked watching Jafar before in the animated one, and I think in this, like, not having that primary villain, it becomes about maybe too many things between like, oh, well, she doesn't get to see the people. You find out her mom was killed. You don't actually know the context of that, but I'm sure that was written down somewhere. A dad is like way less fun. I mean, it's kind of like, hey, remember that movie you really like? Well, what if we made it less fun and with worse people doing the parts that you remember from, you know, a much better movie? I know the controversy of the original Aladdin is it didn't have actual Middle Eastern actors doing those voice roles, but they were much better at doing this kind of slapsticky, quick tempo kind of rhythm to the speech in that. And when I watch this, it's like it's trying to be a little too modern, and I don't really see a perspective as to why. Like, that's the thing about it. The whole time I'm watching, I'm like, this is sure maybe more enjoyable than most of them. I probably, of the ones that try to just be the movie but like sort of different, this is maybe one of the better ones, but like a little better in a way that like I sort of don't care about. I don't see any like huge influence with these live action things. I don't see that in Aladdin. I just see like a big summer blockbustery type thing that's here to continue to infect. In the animated one, it made me think about all these ideas and so forth, but the theme of being trapped doesn't work as well in this. The themes of social statuses don't work as well. They kind of get into effect because in this one, Jafar admits that he was a street rat, and, you know, he used to be like Aladdin, and now he's where he is now. And I kind of am like, oh, that's sort of interesting, but I also kind of feel like you didn't do enough with that. You don't get into that. It's like they go into logistics that we might have joked about before, but they don't really get what works about Aladdin is it was pretty economical and simple, and there weren't that many characters. And in this, they like keep adding on characters. Like Jasmine has a handmaiden for some reason. Iago is just like more of a parrot, which is I don't get. I also don't get why they didn't get like Gilbert Gottfried's crappy replacement that sounded exactly like him, who does the Affleck duck to do it or something. You know, try to be very literal and fleshing things out and being the kind of like boring big studio massive movie version of that, and all the boringness that you can imagine. I kind of sat there and I was surprised how much fun I was having with the actor who played Aladdin and Jasmine and Will Smith in certain sections, but as it went on, I realized like that could carry me through like a bunch of scenes more so than I think I really thought it would. I didn't think I'd really like this movie very much, and it surprised me in those degrees, but I think ultimately the DNA of it, it'll never really be much more. You know, you could cast as many great people as you want and do that, but if you're, you know, one of the things I wasn't in love with the Tim Burton's Dumbo, but I at least respect it more because it got rid of the Dumbo stuff like 15 minutes in, and then it moved on and became its own thing. That might have been weird. It might not have worked all the time. It might have had too many characters again, but at least they did its own thing. And Guy Ritchie, it's like it felt like this was his job to have an easy hit, and sure, he did it, I guess, but like I don't really get having Will Smith in this necessarily. I don't get the need to remake it other than financially. And I think this film really shows, it never becomes more than kind of like what these films are, which are recapturing magic that, they already did. It's very reminiscent of what this era of the Disney studio is. It's about being number one. It's not about innovating. They're not really an innovative studio anymore. They used to be, but that's not the case now. Like, this isn't innovative, I think they're becoming a studio that's good at being number one, and this will keep them at number one. But I think the legacy of these films is rather weak, because no one's still talking about Alice in Wonderland or maybe Maleficent because there's a new one, or like Christopher Robin or any of those films. I never really hear them talked about until there's like a new one coming out, whereas the Disney animated films, they're like within our fabric all the time, and that's how they made lots of money, re-releases and keeping those around. And I feel like this is just like devaluing the brand because of their overall crappiness and sort of uselessness. You can have fun with this, and if someone's like, I really like this movie, I would totally sort of understand it a little bit. But I kind of like, while I was watching, I was like, man, I just want to watch the Robin Williams one when I'm hearing Never Have a Friend, because he's just like trying to recreate things Robin Williams did. And then when we get to the end of it, you're just like, what was the point in trying to recreate these things? Like, why not just re-release it, or why not make it more different? And I think like they can never really answer that. Certainly Dumbo's probably like the closest we'll get to them like actually doing something interesting with one of these. That didn't do well, and it doesn't look like that's a formula that they're really going to stay to. And Aladdin's still an unfortunate bad movie, because I feel like, it had the talent there and things, but like the movie itself wasn't going to let them make these roles their own. The movie was going to try to hit those beats and kind of overcomplicate them with giving you all the stupid details with it. And I don't think that's like really that interesting, and I don't think that really speaks to an audience either. See, we have all the receipts here, so this totally makes sense. You're like, oh, I guess I was right. Neat. So we're gonna watch this movie with Will Smith as the genie, who, sure. I just don't find the real love in these films. These just feel like Disney, the studio, trying to stay on top, and that's kind of depressing at this point. So I think this movie is a more fun depressing, but I think it falls in line with the depressing nature of the Disney live action adaptations or remakes or whatever the fuck, in the terms of like, I don't think we'll ever really escape them, but they're never really going to feel that special, because they're just reminding you how special the past hits were. As soon as they're able to really like free themselves from that and be truly innovative again, as risky as that is, which seems to be something they're not as into anymore, I think Disney will be able to really recapture that magic, because this just feels like a slippery slope where they've completely remade everything and we're still really not watching them a year or two later. And I think like this is like an obvious one where you'd be like, whatever. And I don't think this film can ever like really defend itself against a simple comment of apathy from an audience member. It just kind of, tries to remind you of a much better movie while referencing that other movie and trying to hope you might forget about it and have a good enough time that you won't rewatch it too close to seeing this. That's really its greatest ally, and its greatest ally is just being a really lazy remake of anything, and that is always going to be really boring. So if you have seen Aladdin and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.